Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us again this week. We're going to be talking about our usual features, and later on I'll have my guest, my law partner and good friend Geoff Brown. We'll be talking about college football players sitting out their bowl games, whether they should or shouldn't do that. Even see some coaches sitting out these days. But first, our usual features, and first off is the Community Champion of the Week. This week it's going to be the Youth Services System. Youth Services System is here in Wheeling, and the reason that I note them this week is because of their winter freeze shelter. They provide comfort, they provide a place to lay their head at night, some warmth to people that are homeless and don't have a place to go in the evenings, particularly here when it's cold. This will run through March, and they're actually looking for volunteers, people that can come in and help serve meals, help clean up, provide conversation and comfort, watch over people while they sleep. Basically come in, around the dinner time and be there through the evening, through the night, and then leave 8, 9 o'clock the next morning. So kudos out to the folks at Youth Services System for providing this service to those that are very less fortunate here in the local area, and to all those out there who may be able to help, pick up the phone, give them a call, volunteer a night, volunteer a couple nights if you can, because they could use the help. So Community Champion of the Week, Youth Services System. Next, our quote of the week. And I take these quotes from different places. I've taken them from the Bible, I've taken them from historic figures and music and wherever it may be. And this week it does come from a song, and it comes from the song Closing Time by Semisonic. Maybe not what you would think of for a quote of the week on the Jamie Bordas Show, but I think it's appropriate this week as we're at the beginning of a new year. And the quote is, "Every new beginning comes with some other beginning's end." And I particularly like this verse in the song because it's so true that, as we begin a new year, the previous year came to an end. But that can give us great hope when we have a new year. We can start off anew and set goals, New Year's resolutions, but also mend relationships that maybe have gone astray in some way. Do things at work we've been wanting to do things around the house, do things with our kids that we've been wanting to do, set our sights on something new. And so even though another year came to an end, now there's a new beginning. So take advantage of that opportunity to go out there and do what you want to do this year and make the end of last year this year's new beginning and do something great. Legal tip this week. Real estate contracts have to be in writing. Now, my firm doesn't really practice in real estate. We do it as favors sometimes for friends or former clients or whatever it may be. But real estate contracts have to be in writing because of something called the statute of frauds. The statute of frauds requires in just about every state that certain things be in writing. And real estate contracts, in particular, transfer of interest in land, whether that be an actual sale or some other interest in the land, be in writing. And this can cause people great distress. It can cause people great harm sometimes because they don't realize this. A handshake doesn't do it when it comes to real estate. Hey, I'll offer you this. Yeah, I'll take it. Doesn't do it. And I've actually had this happen to me, even though I knew they had to be in writing. I made an offer on a piece of property one time, and the agent that was representing the seller told me, okay, yeah, we've got a deal. I started getting things ready, processing, doing all those types of things, and was actually drawing up the contract. But before the contract was was drawn up and presented to the other side, before they signed it, they decided to back out and sell it to someone else for various reasons, but they did that. And I had no recourse, and I knew I had no recourse because I did not have a signed contract yet. So no matter what steps you go through, you may have started to obtain financing, you may have proceeded to sell your own piece of property, whatever it may be, make sure you have that contract signed in writing and that there's consequences set forth in that contract if the other party chooses to breach the contract and not go through with the deal. I don't think a lot of people realize this. There are other things that have to be in writing too. For example, things that can't be performed within 1 year, have to be in writing. And there are a whole host of things, and I'll maybe talk about that on future weeks during this show. But because so many people do own real estate or some type of interest in land, and that would also pertain to interests such as mineral interest in land, that those have to be in writing as well. So it's not just the sale of the actual house or the land that sometimes people think of, but interest in land as well, such as mineral interest. And this particularly comes up at times regarding various family members. Hey, when I die, you can have this property, but it's not in a will. Hey, we'll agree that we'll split this 50-50 between siblings or cousins or however it may be, but it's not in writing. These things need to be in writing in order to protect yourself, so make sure that you do that. We're going to need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be speaking with my guest this week, Geoff Brown, and he and I actually have a friendly debate regarding whether or not college football players should play in or sit out their bowl games. Stay with us on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration has been restoring homes after disasters for nearly 4 decades. Through that experience, we present Panhandle Custom Homes, Kitchens, and Baths. We handle your entire project, from concept to completion, working with you every step of the way. From the budget-minded upgrade to a fully custom remodel, you can trust the Panhandle name. Panhandle Custom Homes, Kitchens, and Baths. Welcome home.
Every day, more than 70,000 puppies and kittens are born in the United States. Just one female can contribute more than 2 million offspring in 8 years. At the Tiffany DeLess Spay and Neuter Clinic, we are trying to help. We offer reduced cost services to income qualified families from all over the Ohio Valley. We understand that the cost of owning a pet can be overwhelming, and that stress multiplies when they do. Call the Tiffany DeLess Spay and Neuter Clinic or visit us online to find out if we can help you.
Welcome back to the show. Time for my guest, as we have every week, but this week it's going to be a little bit different. My guest this week is my good friend and law partner, Geoff Brown, and because he's my good friend and law partner, I can take a little bit different approach with him than I do with most of my guests, and that's where we're going to have a little friendly debate here about a subject that he and I have talked about and maybe have a little bit different opinion on, and that's whether or not college football players should sit out in their bowl games. Geoff, thanks for being on the show to talk about this.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
You know, we've been having debates like this since we were in law school.
True.
You know, back in 1997, 20 years ago now. Hard to believe that we first met, you know, on the orientation for law school. And, you know, going to lunch at the huddle at the Notre Dame, the student union there, and talking about different sports issues, legal issues, just current events that we've been talking about. And sometimes you and I, along with our friends Chris Regan, who now practices with us here in Wheeling, and Matt Hofling, who's down in Charlotte, North Carolina, would get into these types of debates, and they can get animated at times. We'll try not to get too animated here, but you know, we've been talking about this issue with college football players, you know, and sitting out their bowl games. You know, one of the high-profile ones here this year, Christian McCaffrey from Stanford, chose not to play for Stanford in its bowl game. You have another kid like Jake Butt, tight end from Michigan, you know, highly regarded tight end in college football, does play against Florida State and tears his ACL. So two different people. One plays, one doesn't, and he does get hurt, Jake Butt does. So, you know, you've taken the position that these guys, it's fine for them to sit out these games.
Absolutely. I think it's fine for them to sit out these games. I think that they ought to have the freedom to do it. And you have to understand what you're asking somebody like Leonard Fournette at LSU or Christian McCaffrey at Stanford to give up to play in these utterly meaningless bowl games. There are some bowl games that have meaning attached to them. The playoffs obviously have a great deal of importance to them. Watching the Penn State USC Rose Bowl, there's no doubt that there are some bowl games that are very meaningful for the teams that are playing in them. As you know, I did my undergrad work at West Point, and we played in the North Texas Bowl against North Texas, the Heart of Dallas Bowl, whatever they call it. Very great game for those two teams. It means a lot to them. I'm sure it was part of the goals that they set. For Stanford and LSU, they had disappointing regular seasons. Those bowl games that they were in were totally, utterly meaningless, played in front of half-empty stadiums. And for Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette to give up what they have to give up to play in these bowl games, I think it's way, way, way too much to ask. As you see with Jake Butt, as you see with Jalen Smith from Notre Dame, who blew out his knee in the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State and is now could have been on this a big part of this Dallas Cowboy team that may be progressing towards the Super Bowl. I think it's way too much to ask these kids to give up to play in these totally meaningless mid-tier bowl games.
Now, see, I would argue that they're not meaningless, and the reason for that is that, you know, what defines meaningless? You know, let's say that a team starts off the year 2-2 during your senior year. All right, so now here you are at the end of September, you're 2-2, you're eliminated from national title contention. Let's say you even have 2 conference losses and you're probably eliminated from the conference championship race. So now here you are sitting at 2-2. Do you sit out those other 8 games? Do they become meaningless? You know, what defines meaningless, in my view, these bowl games, they're nationally televised, they're high-profile events for these schools. These students have chosen to be a part of these teams, and that's a big deal to me. You're getting a scholarship. You're saying, in exchange for this scholarship, I'm going to come play football at this university for this period of time while I'm a student here. Then to say, I'm going to abandon my team, I'm going to abandon the university in this high-profile event that's on national television, because I'm going to look at my own interest. To me, that's just not in the spirit of a team game as football is. And I understand that they have a lot of money on the line, but there's also insurance policies that these kids can go out and buy to protect themselves in the unlikely event that they would be injured. There have been some high-profile examples of kids being injured, like Jalen Smith, like Jake Butt at Michigan. But the vast majority of these kids play in that game and go through it without injury, and that the risk of injury is the same as it would be in any other game. It just happens to be the last game. So, to me, when you're playing a team sport, you're a part of that team. You stay a part of that team until the season is over, unless there's some extenuating circumstances not to. Now, Leonard Fournette, I can a little bit understand. He missed several games, 4 or 5 games over the course of this season because of an ankle injury, and it was still nagging to some degree. Maybe he could have, I bet if it was the national championship game, he would have played.
For sure.
But at least you can say, okay, he's got an injury he's been dealing with. But it's very difficult for me to justify these guys not playing when they're a part of a team.
Well, I don't think that the risk of injury is all that's there either. You have to remember that one of the driving factors for this is the performance of these athletes in the NFL Combine, which is a totally artificial thing. I heard somebody call it the underwear Olympics, all the things that you have to do, all these little technique drills. And so while Christian McCaffrey is spending his time preparing for what I contend to be a meaningless bowl game, and we'll get into that more in a second, there are other players who are competing for spots in that first round, who are out there working every day on those specific drills to improve their draft status, something that Christian McCaffrey's not able to do. Those games are meaningless in the way that even regular season games after the season is over because of the one-loss record aren't. The regular season games have been scheduled for a long time. It's part of every team's goal to perform well in the regular season. These bowl games, for a lot of these teams, are a straight money grab by the school. A straight money grab. A money grab, by the way, that the student athletes don't get to participate in the same way that they don't get to participate in a lot of these things. It's just one more thing that's unfair in the way that these student athletes are treated. And I also sort of object to the idea that Christian McCaffrey has abandoned his team. For all perceptions, his coach, Brian Shaw, was on board with this. So were his teammates. I think Christian McCaffrey handled this the right way by talking to them and getting their input before making this decision. And sending Christian McCaffrey highly into the draft is probably a greater benefit to Stanford as far as his recruiting goes than one more win over a bowl game that nobody will remember, even now. Nobody will remember. So I think that there's benefits to the school as well, and I don't think he's abandoning his team.
Well, we talk about benefits to the school. I mean, you have to look at, I think, the school at large, in addition to just what David Shaw, as the head football coach, may think and what his teammates may think. And there are opportunities there for the school in terms of, that's one of the biggest marketing events of the year in terms of a school, is to be on national television, have their team playing, have the band out there marching, have the cheerleaders there. Local cheerleader, by the way, we should mention, Kaylee Miller from Wheeling Park is a part of Stanford's cheerleading squad, who was an intern for you at our office, by the way, and a very fine young lady, and not at all surprised she's doing so well there. But you've got all these people out there that are invested in this, and these other kids are taking time away from Christmas with their families to be there, all the different things they're doing. And then you have one kid who's choosing to say, I'm not going to be a part of this team anymore, and there may be with the team's blessing in some instances. But I think once you make that commitment, you stick to that commitment. And there are certainly collateral benefits to the university for having a high draft choice, high draft pick, which McCaffrey will be. But now is he getting an advantage over the kids from Alabama, from Clemson, who are going to have to go to the combine also and are risking injury, who are not getting to start with their training for the combine as early. So does he now have an unfair advantage vis-a-vis those other kids who are choosing to continue playing for their schools as well? So it's an interesting situation. We need to take a break. We'll keep talking about it when we come back. We're also going to talk about some coaches that maybe aren't participating in bowl games, and also some NFL teams that are sitting players out. Stay with us on the show.
At Progressive Bank, our loan process is unique. It's personal. Our local lenders ease your mind and help you get the loan you need and deserve. Progressive Bank, personal bankers with millions to lend to local families and businesses. Come in, Ohio Valley. We're lending.
People always ask me what it means to be a dealer for the people. For the people is a simple idea. It means we believe that everybody deserves to drive a nicer, newer car. This belief drives the entire team at Robinson Auto Group to care more, to try harder, and to work smarter. Whatever's keeping you from driving that car you want, I guarantee we'll try our best to help you. We're Robinson Auto Group, and we're the dealer for the people.
Progressive Bank understands borrowing money can be a daunting experience. Our local lenders ease your mind and help you get the loan you need and deserve. Progressive Bank, personal bankers with millions to lend to local families and businesses. Come in, Ohio Valley, we're lending.
Welcome back to the show. My guest this week, Geoff Brown, who's my good friend and law partner, have been having a friendly debate here about whether or not college football players should be permitted and should sit out college bowl games if they're going to risk injury that could affect their NFL draft status. And Geoff, one of the things that I have to ask is, is it a big factor that these kids aren't being paid per se to play in these college football games? That they do get a scholarship, but they're not being paid.
Yeah, it's an enormous factor in my mind in determining where I come out on these issues. The fact is that schools like Stanford are asking players like Christian McCaffrey to take on all the risk of injury and the potential loss of a big part of their future career, all so that the school can reap the benefits of playing in that bowl game. And I think that that's fundamentally unfair.
But isn't that true of every game they play in? Aren't they risking injury so that the school can make money, have a football team, enjoy the benefits of the television deals, et cetera?
No, I think because the bowl game is sort of an extra, additional, like I say, it's a money grab. If there wasn't money motivating this, these schools would never play in these bowl games. The other advantage, of course, the school gets is 3 more weeks of practice added onto it to a lot of their other players. But that's not doing Christian McCaffrey any good. He doesn't need any more college practice. But I think the point is that in those types of situations, sure, the school is asking Christian McCaffrey to take on some risk. But what is the benefit to Christian McCaffrey of taking on those risks? Let's talk about just him individually. There are certain benefits to him. First of all, he gets an opportunity to get an education at Stanford, which is great. I'm sure a lot of the players on his team, that's all the benefit that they'll ever need. Another benefit that Christian McCaffrey is getting, though, is hopefully access to a quality coaching staff, quality facilities, complicated offensive schemes that prepare him well for the next step to move on into the NFL. Those benefits have already been transferred to Christian McCaffrey, hopefully, throughout the course of his playing career at Stanford. He's not going to be a better pro for having practiced for a few more weeks to play in some bowl game. So that benefit has already been transferred. And I understand what you're saying, but there is a significant additional risk for no real reward to him at all. It's different if they're getting paid.
But there is reward to his team. And wouldn't those teammates like to have that bowl ring that says champions of whatever bowl they're in? I think they like to have that. I mean, the guys like to wear those things and like to be proud of the fact of how they finished off the season, their record. It matters to coaches, all-time records, a whole host of things.
Sure.
But I want to ask you about speaking of coaches, a whole other subject, but related, which is we are now seeing coaches who are not coaching in bowl games. Right. We've seen it for a number of years. Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, good example. When he took the Notre Dame job 7-8 years ago, he had an undefeated Cincinnati team that he was the head coach of and left that team before their major bowl game, first time undefeated, I think, in the history of the school, and he leaves that team and they lose their bowl game. Now you see this year, national championship game coming up, Lane Kiffin, who is the offensive coordinator at Alabama, either leaves or was kicked out, it's hard to tell which, by Nick Saban, but it will not be coaching and calling the plays in the national championship game. Instead, Steve Sarkisian, who hasn't even been really a true part of the staff, he's been some type of evaluator or something during the course of the year, but apparently he's part of the state of Alabama's rehabilitation program for USC coaches, because that's where Kiffin had been a former USC coach, right. Sarkisian. But anyway, Sarkisian's going to call the plays now in the national championship game for the first time all year because Kiffin's gone. And these guys are paid a lot of money and they have contractual obligations to coach these teams. Should they stay and finish their season with these teams?
Well, certainly not if the head coach doesn't want you around, which is the perception I get from Alabama. Of course, Lane Kiffin serves in that job at the pleasure of Nick Saban, who is, for all intents and purposes, the king of Alabama at this point. And so if Coach Saban doesn't want Lane Kiffin around anymore, and that's sort of the sense I get from this, then Lane Kiffin is gone. And I think what you get into in a lot of these situations, the Brian Kelly situation is far more interesting about where his loyalties truly lie. Do they lie with getting a head start on recruiting as the new head coach at Notre Dame, or do they lie with helping Cincinnati finish that season?
But isn't that kind of what Kiffin was doing too? I mean, the reason Saban wants him out is because Kiffin wasn't putting his focus on the job he was being paid to do, which is to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama. He was getting a start on being the head coach at Florida Atlantic. He's spending time recruiting, making calls, holding press conferences, doing all the different things that he needed to do for Florida Atlantic as opposed to getting ready for this national championship game.
Yeah, I agree, and it's quite a statement about how that was going with Lane Kiffin. I think I heard on ESPN today that of the last 40 games where Lane Kiffin has been the play caller for Alabama, or I think it was the last 43 games, Alabama's won 40 of them, something along those lines. And so you wonder, is Steve Sarkisian coming out of this consulting role down to the sidelines for the first time ever, is he a step up from Lane Kiffin, who, as distracted as he may be, has been doing that job very successfully for a long time? I think that has more to do with just Saban's comfort level with the way that Lane Kiffin is behaving around those facilities. I think a lot of this might come out later.
Well, perhaps so. But you know, when you've got these, speaking as a coach now, you have certain relationships with players. You understand because you've seen time and time again in practice what they can and can't do. You've seen how they execute certain plays. You know what may have worked when you called it in a certain situation before. And I'm sure Sarkisian has studied all of those things in terms of the Alabama team because he's been some type of consultant or evaluator or whatever he is as part of the staff. But to not be the play caller, now all of a sudden you're having to decide what is the best play here on 3rd and 3 when the game's on the line, and knowing whether this guy's going to get the tough yards or not, that's a whole different story. And to me, the fact that Lane Kiffin was not putting his whole heart and effort into finishing off this season for which he was contractually obligated to do, and that Saban either had to say you're gone because you're not putting your full energy into it, or Kiffin decided to leave, whichever it may be, the fact of the matter is that Kiffin had an obligation to do this, and now here's the national championship game with no offensive coordinator. I think it's a real shame.
Yeah, I think it is too. And the other thing is not that Lane Kiffin seems to care about any of this, but you think about the effect that might have, the chilling effect on schools allowing their star assistant coaches to entertain head coaching offers. I mean, it's a big part of that business, is the best performing offensive, defensive, special teams coordinators often get promoted to the head coaching jobs at other schools. And a lot of times it's viewed poorly on a school. If one school calls and says, hey, can we talk to your offensive coordinator about our head coaching position? A lot of times you expect the current school to say yes. It would be looked on as sort of bad form to deny one of your assistant coaches that opportunity. Well, you look at how this relationship fell apart. The next time somebody calls Alabama or Notre Dame or Texas or USC or one of these high-profile schools saying, can we talk to your offensive coordinator? Can we talk to your defensive coordinator about a head coaching job? I think that school will be awfully tempted to say, well, no.
Yeah.
Well, look at what happened with Lane Kiffin. We're not going through that. You want to talk to him, you wait till the end of our bowl game, and then you can talk to him.
Makes sense. Well, I appreciate being on the show here today, have this little discussion and debate here today. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and always good to have you here. We'll see what happens in that national championship game. I'm going to take Clemson because I don't like the freshman quarterback having to make decisions when the game's on the line and the new offensive coordinator and everything. I'm going to go with Clemson.
Alabama all the way.
All right, we'll see. We need to take a break. When we come back, I will be talking sports, particularly the NFL playoffs. Stay with us.
Fighting for homeowners.
Fighting for workers.
Fighting for children.
Fighting for mineral owners.
Fighting for patients.
Fighting for policyholders.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration has been restoring homes after disasters for nearly 4 decades. Through that experience, we present Panhandle Custom Homes, Kitchens, and Baths. We handle your entire project, from concept to completion, working with you every step of the way. From the budget-minded upgrade to a fully custom remodel, you can trust the Panhandle name. Panhandle Custom Homes, Kitchens, and Baths. Welcome home.
Welcome back to the show. We're going to talk about the NFL playoffs here, and Geoff Brown and I ran a little bit long talking college football, so we're a little limited on time, but let's talk about the Steelers, of course, first. 7-game winning streak to finish off the season, with last week's overtime win over the Cleveland Browns without a lot of the starters even playing. What an exciting finish with the pass from Jones to Hamilton to end the game on a walk-off touchdown after the Browns had kicked the field goal with the first possession in overtime. But now the Steelers face the Miami Dolphins at home this week in the wild card round of the AFC playoffs. Of course, the Steelers won the division under the 3 seed, so they get to host. But the Dolphins beat the Steelers 30-15 earlier in the season that started that 4-game losing streak that the Steelers had. And of course, Jay Ajayi, the running back for the Dolphins, had a big game, over 200 yards rushing against the Steelers down in Miami. But I think this week will be a little bit different with the game at Heinz Field, the cold weather. The Steelers have been rolling. The defense is playing better. Ben, Le'Veon Bell, AB all rested after not playing last week. I like the Steelers by 10 in this one, and I think that they're going to be very impressive. The Dolphins, probably without starting quarterback Ryan Tannehill. That means that Matt Moore is going to have to play quarterback. And, anytime you're without your starting quarterback in the NFL, that's a tough thing. Matt Moore has some experience. He's played the last couple of weeks, but I just think the Steelers are going to be too much in the win by 10. The other game in the AFC, of course, quarterback problems all over the place. Oakland Raiders at the Houston Texans, and the Raiders, of course, Carr is out injured, and now they're debating, is Matt McGloin going to start? Is Connor Cook, the rookie, going to start? Who knows? But then Houston's got similar problems. Brock Osweiler was the starter. They brought him in from Denver, paid him all kinds of money. He lost his starting job to Tom Savage, who's now out injured and likely won't play, and Brock Osweiler will be the starter. And so all kind of quarterback problems there. I think Oakland's had a really nice season, though, and I think they'll go down to Houston and win that game on the road. So I'll take the Raiders in that one. In the NFC, and I should note, by the way, in the AFC, if the Steelers do win, they'll go to Kansas City next week and play the Chiefs, a team that they blew out on a Sunday night earlier in the season at Heinz Field. But the Chiefs have been playing great football, too. New England home field advantage throughout the playoffs are always tough. But in the NFC, this week, the Detroit Lions at the Seattle Seahawks. Now, I picked Seattle to go to the Super Bowl before this season started. I said it'll be a Pittsburgh versus Seattle Super Bowl. I'm going to stick with that since I picked it before the year started. They're both still alive. So I think Seattle will get through this week's game. I think Pete Carroll teams have been very well coached in recent years. Russell Wilson, usually pretty steady when things are important. So I'll take the Seahawks in this one. But the other game in the NFC, very interesting. Two high-performing, great quarterbacks. The New York Giants at the Green Bay Packers. Eli Manning versus Aaron Rodgers. I'll take the Packers because it's at Lambeau. Tough place to play. Giants are used to cold weather games too, playing in New York, but that Lambeau field and the home field advantage should do something for Green Bay there. I like Green Bay in this one. Atlanta, Dallas sitting at home this weekend, watching Dallas with home field throughout the playoffs. They've been looking awfully impressive, but with those rookies, I just don't know if they can get all the way to the Super Bowl, so I'm going to stick with Seattle, as I said. In Atlanta, Matt Ryan, now an MVP favorite for the NFL this year. I just don't think they've got enough playoff experience and enough grit to be able to get through the NFC. So that's why I'm liking Seattle in the NFC playoffs. So I'm going to stick against Seattle, Pittsburgh, but I think the Steelers are going to look awfully impressive this week. We'll check back in on it next week on the show. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Let's see if they can get a big win this week. We'll see you next week on the Jamie Bordas Show.